Chapter 7. Mackenzie collapsed into the passenger seat, staring out the window as Jake navigated his way into a deserted downtown Essex. She was exhausted. The last 24 hours had depleted her physically and emotionally. She couldn't handle much more, and the idea of sitting still, doing nothing, in the safety of the vehicle was the closest thing to heaven she could think of. She desperately wished she was home with Chloe, Rachel, and Kat. She didn't even have the energy to be disgusted with herself for acknowledging Sanford as home. She just wanted her 3 best friends. Not that Jake wasn't a pretty good substitute. He'd literally been her knight in shining armor. It was his logical practicality that was keeping this shit show on the road. The shit show being her. Unbidden, the memory of their conversation yesterday crept back into her consciousness, making her tummy do a funny tumble. "I know what I want, Mac. I want you." She wanted to dismiss his declaration. Instead, she worried at it like a child with a loose tooth. Jake was in love with her? It was just so unbelievable. Jake was Sanford's golden boy. He was quarterback the year Sanford High School had gone to state. Betty, at Trader Joe's, still slipped him candy at the checkout, and he was 23, not 5. God, he is 23. Mac could just imagine how Sanford would react. They'd want to burn her at the stake. Even she knew she wasn't good enough for Jake. She'd literally grown up with Jake on the periphery. He was a constant, a touchstone of familiarity and the comfort of childhood. And while she was forging a new life for herself in Chicago, he'd grown into a man with intriguing possibilities. The pull of attraction was unsettling. Not only had she been in a relationship just yesterday, but this was Chloe's little brother. She wondered where Peter was right now, if he'd made it to pick up his daughter. She was sad for him, but in a detached way, like she'd known him years ago. A small convoy of military vehicles rumbled up from behind and overtook them, not pausing as they continued on. Starting, Mackenzie blinked her eyes back into focus. A man was crumpled on the sidewalk and a woman was sobbing, pulling futilely on his arm. She had twin rivulets of blood streaming unchecked from her nose. Jesus, people are literally dropping on the sidewalk, Jake swore. Mackenzie continued to watch the convoy as they drove slowly past. A cavern of hopelessness bloomed in her chest. Turning back to face the windshield, she closed her eyes. Was this life now? Watching people die and just driving past? "That's the hiking store," said Jake, pointing at a bright blue building to their left. "It doesn't look open." Jake ignored her. "Are you ready to do some shopping?" "I think it's called shoplifting, not shopping." "Come on, Mac. Weren't you the one asking for a sleeping bag last night?" "That was you." "Okay, maybe it was," he conceded, "but if we're going to sleep outside again, wouldn't you prefer to do it in a sleeping bag?" "I don't plan on sleeping outside again. Do we really need to do this? We're on our way home. We don't need camping supplies." "We don't need camping supplies," he agreed. "But this is serious, Mac. Life isn't just going to go on like it did before." Mackenzie shifted in her seat, finally taking the time to digest their new reality. "You're right," she said slowly, thinking. "How long do you think the electricity is going to keep going? And even if some of the country's food producers survive the virus, what are the chances that the transport drivers will also survive? The distribution facilities, the warehouse and supermarket workers?" He nodded, eyes somber. "This could all blow over tomorrow, next week, and I'm happy to be called a fool for being a doomsday prepper, because I'd much rather that than find out it's not going to blow over and we don't have matches and flashlights and batteries for when the power goes out, when we don't have hunting knives and fishing rods to keep ourselves fed. Whatever happens, we're going to survive, Mac." Jake had a determined tilt to his chin, and Mackenzie felt a flutter of something, knowing he'd look out for her, care for her, no matter what. There was something primal, primitive in his confidence, in his assurance of protection. And hell, maybe she and the girls could finally sleep out in the backyard overnight. Okay, she nodded, but we can't just smash the front window to get in. We don't want to draw attention to ourselves. Sit tight. I'll walk around to the back of the building and see if there's a window I can break into there. She nodded again, locking the truck's doors as soon as he'd gotten out, and watching as he walked with a long-legged stride around the corner. Was it wrong to check out his ass? Definitely. It's a really nice ass, though. In less than 5 minutes, he was inside the store, unlocking the front door and gesturing for her. That was quick. The back door was wide open, he admitted. No need for hero tactics. I don't think we're the first to have this idea. Checking the empty sidewalk behind her, he pulled the doors closed and bolted them. The store was enormous, with row after row of outdoor camping equipment, tents and canoes, hiking gear, and paraphernalia she couldn't guess the use of. Her eyes widened with overwhelm. Where do we even start? We'll kit ourselves first, Jake said. Choose a backpack that you can easily carry when it's full, and then look for hiking boots. The women's hiking clothing is over there. Pick out 2 full outfits and a couple of extra pairs of socks, but do it quick. There'll be others who think of raiding this place. The knowledge they could soon be joined by other survivors gave Mackenzie a jolt of trepidation. The fewer people they came across, the less the chance of the virus infecting them. Meet me at the front counter when you're done, and we'll get together some camping equipment. I'm hoping there might even be a small solar generator here. Mackenzie hadn't even realized that solar generators were a thing. Shaking off that thought, she headed for the racks of women's clothing, a trickle of anticipation replacing the trepidation. Shopping she could do. Slipping behind a half wall of shelves, she changed into a pair of black, fitted cargo pants and a gray waffle knit Henley. The thick merino wool socks were deliciously soft on her ravaged feet, and when she found a pair of hiking boots that had shearling inserts, she almost cried. It was like walking on clouds. Coordinating a second outfit and some lightweight merino base layers, she then stuffed them all into a bright yellow backpack. Don't forget to grab a warm, waterproof jacket, Jake shouted from across the store. I'm almost done, she called back. Need me to find anything else? His head popped around the corner, grinning. I think I have everything. I'm just going to look for a portable water purification system. By the time Jake finally deemed them sufficiently prepared, Mackenzie's backpack contained a flashlight, a first aid kit, a water bottle, sunscreen, matches, hand sanitizer, a survival knife, a compass. Do you really think I'm qualified to use this? An LED headlamp and a sleeping bag. Jake had also put together a pack with tent and cooking equipment, along with the water purification system and solar generator he'd been looking for. Mackenzie smirked at him. You look like a pack horse. A prepared pack horse. He grinned back. Jake was energized with purpose, and Mackenzie took a moment to admire his assertiveness, the straightforward manner in which he'd taken control, allowing her a comforting warmth in his steadfast protection. Who knew making someone feel safe could be sexy? His broad shoulders easily carried the weight, and her stomach fluttered at the man before her. He was gorgeous and competent. Did she mention gorgeous? Her eyes roved greedily over the hard planes of his chest, down the thickly corded muscles of his forearms. Like what you see, he drawled quietly, stepping so their torsos brushed ever so lightly. Mackenzie's nipples hardened perceptibly beneath her top, and her breathing hitched. She couldn't tear her eyes away from the full bottom lip of his mouth. What would it feel like to kiss him? To kiss Jake? The faint but distinct popping of gunshots in the distance had them jumping apart, breathing heavily. The hiking store had been a cocoon from reality, and Mackenzie had actually had fun playing at Doomsday Prepper. But it was time to get moving. They exited the store, tossing all the equipment into the back of the truck. They weren't playing at anything, as evidenced by the dead body of a man in the gutter across the road who hadn't been there when they'd parked. As she stood eyeing the corpse, a police siren split the still air, jolting her. Cowering instinctively against the side of the truck, she watched as a police car careened around the corner, its siren wailing. It was speeding far too fast for safety, and several youths were hanging out the windows, hollering with unrestrained joy. "What the hell?" yelled Jake. "Mac, get in the truck." Scrambling to obey, she slammed and locked the door behind her, but the police car was already in the distance, the siren growing fainter. They sat silently, watching until the police vehicle rounded a far corner and disappeared. "I can't wait to get home," Mackenzie surprised herself by saying. Jake just nodded grimly and started driving. They were cruising down the highway, Jake driving with a careless competence, when they came across the first deserted gas station with a handmade sign proclaiming no gas. Apart from two vehicles they'd passed going in the opposite direction, the highway had been just as deserted. "Where do you think everyone is?" Jake asked, breaking off a piece of bread roll and chewing. "They're probably either staying inside or dead." Mackenzie wished he hadn't asked. Everyone couldn't be dead. Surely. "Do you think everyone is okay in Sanford?" she asked quietly. Jake stared ahead, his jaw working. Finally, he answered, "Yes." His eyes were trained on the empty highway before them. "They're going to be fine." Mac couldn't bear to think of her best friends suffering, with blood running down their faces. She couldn't imagine a world without Kat, Chloe, and Rach. Her heart ached with a fierce need to be with them.